I think it's a sign of insecurity and unhappiness. Obviously, when someone gets plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery, it's to change something about themselves that they're unhappy with. There's just so many things you could do to yourself. And at this point in my life, if I wanted to, I would have the means to do pretty much anything I want. Even back then, as a little girl with my mom, it was put into my head that you couldn't really be beautiful without having larger eyes. So we all have our own perception of beauty. It has a lot to do with my Asian culture, but at the same time, it has a lot to do with my American culture, too. It's really confusing, you know? It's like, what is Asian culture? Because if you're like me and most of my friends where you're born in another country but grew up here pretty much since the age of 4 or 5, how are you supposed to be held accountable for acting a certain way? You know, you're expected to be, like in my case, Vietnamese, but how do I know what Vietnamese is supposed to be? I grew up in the US. It's really hard. That's why with Asian eyelid surgery, it's like some critics might say you're abandoning your Asian heritage, you know, but what Asian heritage is it that I'm abandoning? Well, I live at the house that I grew up in, which still belongs to my mom. My dad passed away in like 1999, so almost 7 years. Next month there'll be 7 years, so that's why he's not around. So that's why I was left here with this house. It's kind of strange because although it's the same house, it doesn't feel the same because it's like the same people aren't here. But in a way, I mean, it's good because I have like that familiarity. Like I know which restaurants to go to. I know the local hangouts and what to do and all that. But at the same time, it's kind of like, it sucks because it's like you feel like left behind, you know? That's the major reason why I'm moving. I just want a change of scenery. Even though things aren't bad here, they're actually really good. But it's kind of a nice thing to like move away and leave something good. I think that's better than leaving something bad. Everyone thinks like I'm going to LA to party and the social life is so much better up there, but that's not really the reason. I just want to get away. I'm just really in transition. I think I'm going through the quarter-life crisis. I thought I was over it, but I don't think I am. I'm beginning to be like, who am I? What do I want? I need something new, you know? New location, new lifestyle, new look. I wanted a change. I've always wanted to live in a new city and live on my own. And then I've wanted for years to have bigger eyes. So since I'm doing this, why not get that taken care of too? So it's very personal. I don't want to have regrets. I want to say I did everything I wanted to do.
There's a belief that's centuries old, which is that you can tell a person's fate and fortune from the shape of certain facial features.
Even before the American influence, when I read stories, novels in Korean literature and Japanese literature, when the author tries to describe beautiful women, they talk about large eyes. Large eyes, expressive, you know, like looking at lake. And I think the first motivation probably is to make your eyes look larger, not just to have two 쌍꺼풀. 쌍 means double.
So there's a belief that if you have a certain kind of eye, it goes along with a certain kind of personality. Double eyelid surgery makes the eyes look larger, and this makes them more emotionally expressive and implies a stronger character. Around 1880, a physician named Hotz, F.C. Hotz, invented a procedure to cure entropium, which is an inward turning of the eyelid after an infection. And he published an article on it in German in 1880. And in that article, he stated that it was very interesting that the crease that was produced by this procedure was very attractive looking and perfectly natural looking. He said, it leaves nothing to be desired in perfection. And then a guy named Mikamo Kotaro, who was a Japanese physician, read the Japanese textbook which described Hotz's procedure, noted that it had said that this procedure produces a very nice crease in the eyelid, and he knew that double eyelids were already popular in Japan at this time. And so he designed a procedure which was purely a cosmetic procedure, not a medical procedure, and started doing it on Japanese women who were requesting the operation. So then he published an article on it in 1896, and that's the first article that we know of describing double eyelid surgery.
But you have the ways in which gender operates in this system. You have, for example, military bases being set up, and to this day they exist in many parts of the Pacific and Asia. And with the military bases, which up until recently has been mainly men, you also have the establishment of red light districts.
Either it's a relationship of violence and rape, and prostitution, which is one kind of male-female relationship that goes along with war, or wartime brides. And both of those have been given as reasons for the spread of cosmetic surgery in Asia.
After the Korean War around the 1950s, there were plastic surgeons there that were doing free work on Koreans. And one of the very first plastic surgeons there to describe doing eyelid surgery, it was my teacher. And he told me that the patient was a Korean woman. Basically, she was a prostitute for the American soldiers. And she felt that she could make more money if she looked more Caucasian. So in that operation, he carefully studied the anatomical details of a Caucasian eyelid, and then he replicated it on this woman. He told me the woman was very happy. I guess she got a lot more business too.
People in the West have been really interested in Asian eyelid surgery, particularly. They feel self-congratulatory about it. They want to believe that everybody wants to emulate them or look like them, or everyone admires them, and that's why they want to have double eyelids. These standards of beauty, like light skin, tall stature, and double eyelids or large eyes, start from trying to approximate the look of the people who are the most powerful and the richest. It might start that way, but I don't think that it's as simple as people would like to say that she wants to look white.
She has a planet for a long time ago, since the last year. Because of me, she didn't move.
How do you feel about Mayan's move to Los Angeles?
I'm very emotional. Of course, I want them. She's still like my baby. I don't want her to be out my sight. It's not very far from my house to LA, but it's a strange place. I wonder if I will be able to go there.
Mom! It's annoying. We get in a lot of arguments. It caused a lot of tension. So I don't think we have like the best relationship that we've ever had, unfortunately. And I think this is just a general thing for most second-generation Americans. It's like we don't understand where our parents are coming from. We don't know the culture that they grew up in, I wish my relationship with my mom was better. She's my business partner and things, but she doesn't quite understand what I do a lot of times. She has really high expectations a lot of times. And even though we've come really far, she can't really see it. 2.5 years ago, all we had was this house. And since then, we've gone on to acquire like 6, 7 other good homes. My life pretty much evolves around my business and making the real estate thing work. I actually pay for her mortgage as well as mine. So, but I think she's getting spoiled. I'm hoping we could like get over it soon. But I think it'll be like probably a couple of years or so. But yeah, I know she means well and I know I'm loved. She's a mom, and she's an Asian mom.
Really very hungry, I think. I should give to her something, okay?
Mom shouldn't give us so much food. No, because we don't really have spoons and forks until I unpack. But Mom, we don't have any... At first, my mom, she didn't really want me to. But they know I'm really like stubborn and strong-willed, so if I ever want to do something, that I'll just do it. There's no stopping me, I guess.
Would you move to LA?
Because...
You'll be back in less than a year.
I can't be. I have a year lease.
All right, you'll be back in a year.
No. I might open that body wrap shop there, which means I won't ever be back. Mom, we're not gonna doi bụng. There's plenty of food around there. Yes. House all locked up? Okay, good. Dang, my mom was right. I should have taken one of those sandwiches. My mom, she is a wonderful person and I love her more than anyone in the whole wide world, but she's done a lot of damage to me. I remember earlier on in my life, my mom was just like, your eyes are small, you're dark, you have a flat nose. You know, Mayan, you're really not a very pretty girl. It used to hurt my feelings, and now I'm just like pissed off because my mom she's like the typical Asian mom. I'm educated in the American way, whereas like she's educated in the Vietnamese way. I guess for some reason she's always pushed me the hardest because I always did really well in school and pretty much most of the things I tackled business-wise. So she has a lot of expectations for me and I'm getting really fed up with it, you know. They want their kids to be able to live the American dream, and that part of the American dream is having it all. Being successful financially, having a nice house, nice car, perfect family, being trim, attractive, fit, being admired in society. So all that, it's just an extension of the American dream.
That does sometimes feel like it relates to this model minority, need to be perfect, need to have straight A's, and then by extension, how the person looks, who they socialize with.
Asian parents, perfection is everything.
It almost goes hand in hand. You have to do well in school, you have to be fit, you know, you have to succeed in almost all parts of life, and it's a lot of pressure.
Whatever it takes to get in to Harvard or Yale, you have to do it. And the same thing is true of your daughter's looks, you know, because she only has a short time when she can trade on her looks. You just have, the people feel that they have to maximize it. You can never feel very good if there's constantly a critical eye shining on you, I think, no matter what you look like or how good in school you are. I just think you can't be satisfied, you can't be happy.
I find a lot of Asian American women, they have this perfectionist drive. I think Asian American women put a lot of stress on themselves, put a lot of demands on themselves. They're their harshest critic. And I think and it's, you know, no one wants to talk about it because no one wants to admit their failures.
I want to be, you know, ahead of the game. But I think that comes from like my upbringing. It's probably primarily upbringing and then like personality, like my competitive personality. I don't think if I had my mom or even my dad, like the way he was, I would care nearly as much. My dad, he worked really hard to bring us over to the US. Even as a child, he's like, I don't want you to have to struggle like we did. I do want to make my dad proud. So I feel like an extreme pressure to perform financially, to do really well career-wise. I want that, you know, recognition by my family. Because I'm the youngest, so I've always had to prove things. I've never been taken as seriously. And that certainly is a motivating factor. It's nice though, huh? Good location and everything.
That one looks nice.
This place is very expensive.
Soon you'll find a job here.
Where would I find a job, Mom?
Find something to do.
If I do anything, it's going to be to open my body wrap shop.
There's nothing to say about that, but you didn't do anything.
Mom, it's because it takes a lot of planning. You don't want to open a business and just rush into it.
She studied really hard. She is the most successful in 3 of her siblings.
I think my mom actually approves of the place. Because she's like, if I was rich, I wouldn't live here, but I guess it's okay.
Something bad, something good. Because if she worked, study, she didn't have time to communicate with family members, then cannot be so close. She always wants to be on herself.
Thank you, Mommy Bao. Drive safely. Easy.
Enjoy, huh? Enjoy.
Okay, bye, Mom. Thank you. Love you. It's not just through the American media that's cultivated this preference in larger eyes, but it's also, you know, through my mom and seeing the different Asian actresses and models. You know, the ones that I've seen usually have that double lid and have big eyes, and that's what's considered beautiful in Asian societies too. Hollywood doesn't focus too much on portraying accurately like the Asian American woman. It does bother me that the only time they really give roles to women is when it's a kung fu movie or, you know, they need an action hero. Because there's not a lot of Asians featured in the media, there is a lot of pressure on Asian American women to enculturate and be that more Caucasian ideal. That is what's featured as beautiful.
What does it mean to be a racial minority in this country and see those same images? That sometimes the research says either, well, women of color are kind of protected somehow against that, well, it just doesn't relate to them. So they look at this and they feel like, oh, this isn't about me. But other research would suggest, no, they take it in even more and say, well, I'm not represented, I'm totally invisible. What does this really say about me? I'm not important enough.
It's very debilitating for people to be completely invisible, or to be seen only in terms of distortion. So omission and distortion are very debilitating. So on the one hand, you might have exoticization, and on the other hand, you might have disappearance, and neither one of those is really that great.
The tendency of Hollywood is to portray Asian women in one way or the other, in one extreme or another.
Holy shit.
Which is either as the kick-ass dominatrix kind of character, or the converse.
It's got all the warning signs. One-way ticket, no money, no credit cards, no hotel reservations.
I'm here to get married.
No groom.
Hey, China doll. Thank you. You look good.
You have Frank's number. Call me.
Which is as the sort of submissive, lotus flower, obedient, tea-pouring, back-scrubbing, exotic and sexual geisha or a China doll.
You have movies that emphasize this kind of relationship, and they're always in relationship to a white man.
Just a little lower, Katsumi. You always seem to be a little above it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Asian American women in particular are often stereotyped into this sexualized Susie Wong prostitute. I think about all those war films where Asian women were kind of the spoils of war.
She give you everything you want. Long time. Everything you want.
Helpless victims, passive but very sexualized.
There's a certain vilification that goes with a certain demonization or a dragon lady aspect of that goes with any woman holding a position of power. But in the Asian context, what makes it quite different is the association of sexuality with that as well.
Anna May Wong, very mysterious, powerful, evil somehow, but again, very sexualized, with all of these powers to kind of ensnare men.
Why do Chinese girls taste different from all other girls?
You think we better, huh?
No, just different. Like Peking duck is different from Russian caviar, but I love them both.
Darling, I give you very best duck.
Well, that'd be lovely.
They saw Lucy Liu, and they thought that was an exoticization, a fetishization, and an orientalization. And that although she kicks butt in her films,
We love you, baby.
she's a kind of an exoticized creature.
Me love you time.
People often ask me, isn't Hollywood better now? We have these kind of dominatrix Asian women in really assertive kind of roles. What happens is we just swing from one dichotomy to the other, from submissive to dominant, from dominant back to submissive.
Most of us aren't either, you know? Like, I'm not hugely kinky, and I'm not also, like, I certainly don't know any martial arts, but, you know, I think when people look at us, I think that's sort of what they think.
As times have changed, as marketing budgets have increased, as the consumer segment has gotten more sophisticated, and marketers gotten a little bit more risk-taking, you start to see that they want to go for what they would consider the modern Asian consumer. So we're not necessarily looking for someone who looks very traditionally Asian.
It was like the casting director would just choose the most Asian-looking girl. She doesn't even have to be pretty. She just has to look Asian.
In the media and in the popular culture, you see a lot of Asian Americans portrayed in a very exotic light. I think there has been protest around the fact that if you have an Asian American character of any kind, They're typically made to look much more Asian or cast in this very Orientalist light with the eyes and with the makeup and with the hair and with the way that they comport themselves. So I think the objections would definitely be there.
Asian women are like a hot commodity. The stereotype is that we're exotic, we're beautiful, we're different. We are this almost like a premium product that you want to get your hands on.
This idea that race has some sort of sexual connotation is simply a manifestation of the stereotypes and the kind of cultural desires and fantasies that Western culture has held for centuries of interaction with Asia. So there are about 3 times more internet websites dedicated to fetishizing Asian women than there are to any other fetish. And it indicates that there really is an Asian mystique out there. This idea of the Asian woman as decadent and sensual and obedient and sexually available. And it really does fuel an enormous industry in pornography.
Or Asian American feminine identities evolved in the sense that, you know, before we didn't see such, so many Asian American women, but also we're seeing more depictions of Asian American women as being strong, as being empowered, as being not cutesy, not meek, but being kind of brash, brusque, and not conforming to those stereotypes.
Every time a non-grotesque Asian American face appears on the screen, it's helpful to people. It's very unhelpful to have 16 candles or something. It hurts people's self-esteem, and it also helps other people treat them badly to have those kinds of images perpetuated. So it's really important to have something good. Or not something good, but just something human.
Keep young and beautiful. It's your duty to be beautiful. Keep young and beautiful if you want to be loved.
I went to a predominantly Caucasian high school, and when I was younger, I felt like an ugly duckling because I didn't look like all my classmates. The most popular, the most admired girls, the ones that got attention were 5'10" and really thin and, you know, had blue eyes. There was no way I could look like them. So it always made me feel like I could never be beautiful, I wasn't attractive, and it made me feel inferior. I really didn't like myself. When I went to college, I'm like, okay, I didn't realize how much I was missing because I was introduced to this Asian culture. Like, my friends taught me how to wear makeup that was, you know, complementary to my Asian features. My perception of beauty changed. Whereas I recognize Asian beauty more, and I recognize that, yeah, I can be beautiful if I did the right things. Like, I can look good in other people's eyes.
The Asian eye is not one that is tilted. I think there's a mistake in the West in thinking that the characteristic difference is a greater medial to lateral tilt in the eye. And this isn't the case.
The people that started to write about the anthropology of race in the 18th century already were stereotyping Asian eyes as slit and slanted, and that's always been the main stereotype in the West.
In the 19th century, the idea of those slanty eyes and pigtails and orange skin was expressing the absolute otherness of those people. They were so unlike civilized white people.
In the anti-Asian movement, you began seeing the representations of Asian men and women in increasingly bizarre ways. European Americans would focus on some of the differences of features. So this is where eyes, I think, began to be obsessed about and fetishized.
The sense of beauty, of worth, of merit, then, becomes defined by those who have the power to define, to articulate, to impose those ideas.
If everyone who is the richest and the most powerful in the world were short and had small eyes and kinky hair, then everybody would want that ultimately. So it's really about power, and beauty, I think, is about power.
It's in those places in which that interaction happens, that contact happens, and the power begins to shift, that the double eyelid becomes questioned.
As long as there has been a Western empire of some kind, a lot of these other countries have likely been influenced in some way, whether in their, whether through pictures or whether through diplomats or whether through, imagining in some way that their eyes and their noses are different.
Human beings are capable of finding difference beautiful. And what's kind of sad is the way that somehow that potential, it seems, has historically gotten lost in the history of Western racism. That as thinking about categories of people crystallizes and they become problems that need to be dealt with, then suddenly they're not beautiful anymore, they're ugly, and they are not like us. The history of slavery in the US has a lot to do with that too, in which you have vested political interest in classifying people as subhuman and inferior. And then Asian Americans, of course, as they immigrated into the US in large numbers, got sucked into that category-making machine.
In this country, Asian Americans are caught within certain notions of beauty and the normative notions of who's beautiful, who's not.
No kid likes to get singled out or picked on, but often if it's around a racial characteristic, then that can result in really a lot of racial self-hatred.
I got picked on a lot for being Asian, constantly. I grew up kind of not liking being Chinese at all. I hated it. I really disliked it. I wanted to be white so bad.
Each culture, as it comes into a heavily normative, powerful, commercial, political culture, is going to measure their unique cultural features against the normative features.
We usually find Asian women beautiful when they look more American. Very sharp features, double eyelids.
I've talked to Asian American women who walk into my office and say they're struggling with food and eating and they're dissatisfied with their body. Well, some of those same women have often dyed their hair blonde. They wear colored contacts. So to just dismiss that or to just say that's a personal choice may miss some of the complexity of feeling like, well, why are you choosing to do this? Or you're Asian American, you're wearing green contact lenses. There's something striking about it.
I've altered things about myself, but, I will never deny that I'm Asian. And if someone asks me, what I am, I'd say first and foremost, I'm Vietnamese.
Okay. I feel like when I wear contacts, my eyes look bigger. It makes me look a little bit more mixed, not so much Asian. I don't know what it is though. It's just like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable with myself.
A lot of the mentality these days are like mixed girls are hot. Everyone wants to feel good about themselves, and doing that probably, gives yourself a little boost.
Now in society, especially in the MTV or youth culture, you're seeing people who look mixed or multi-ethnic, multiracial as being valorized everywhere.
There's a global beauty standard. Maybe it started with the whole multiculturalism in America.
I really think that we're moving more towards kind of a democratic view of aesthetics.
I sometimes want to date, or have mixed babies. My friends are mixed. I'm just like, you're so beautiful. I'm drawn to you. And I want, my children to be pretty too. And I just feel like, Asian people are just not as attractive.
And so you have that morphing of an ideal woman in the 21st century America as being a composite of all the races, which becomes the ideal woman or the standard of beauty, which is actually a homogeneous face in which diversity becomes homogeneity. Fetishization around multiracialism might actually be a fetishization of uniformity.
Molly and I have had a long conversation about color, and it came about because she said to me one day, Mom, and she knows I call myself a yellow American. I said, Mom, you're yellow, and Dad's white, and I'm white. And I said, no, you're not. I said, you're half white, and you're half yellow. I said, no, I'm not. I'm white, like Dad. I said, no, you're not. You're also half from me. She wasn't quite able to understand because she's going by just total skin color. The hairs on her body are blonde. So it made me cry inside that she would not have that part of her life, you know, that that she wouldn't have that part of me with her. And it also made me feel like maybe she didn't love me as much as she loved her father, which I know is ridiculous. So, I know that is ridiculous because in every other way she wants to be like me. But still, I have thought, how can I make sure that that part of me, even though that I don't embrace that by name, that country's culture from which my parents came from, how do I make sure that she has that open to her as she grows? And in a sense, it has made me become more Korean than I have ever been in my life for my daughter.
Some days I'm happy and some days I'm not. I feel like, okay, I'll never measure up to, you know, to what I want. A lot of days I'm like, I'm not thin enough, my skin's breaking out, you know, I have small eyes. I still think a lot of negative things about my appearance. But I think like slowly but surely I'm getting out of not caring as much just because I've learned that there's like so many other aspects to life than that. But I have to say, yeah, my appearance I'm still not that happy about. So that's one of the crutches in my life. I've had a very early awareness of it through the Vietnamese magazines that my mom and dad would read and seeing photos of before and after patients and others getting it done. But I didn't actively seek it out until probably a year ago when I started looking on the internet and reading up more about it. This is something I've wanted for a long time. This is not something where one day I was like, done, gonna do it. I remember 18, 16, even thinking, wish I could have bigger eyes.
We were talking about doing the eyelid surgery. Do you have a sense of how large you want to do it? Small, medium, large?
Well, when we discussed it earlier, it'd be like where my natural fold.
Where it's starting to fold now, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
where it's starting to fold.
Sure, okay. So what I'll do, I'm gonna swing around and we'll have you hold a mirror here.
I'm not going to deny it. To look my best is very important to me. But I think that comes back from my mother. She's always instilled in me since I was a child that being beautiful, looking your best is very, very important. Like it makes or breaks you.
Your family does not know that you're getting the eyelid surgery?
No. My brother would be like, what the heck are you doing? My sister, like, she'll think it's dumb.
All right, now you want it slightly larger?
My mom would be for it. She's actually encouraged me to get it. And that's why for a long time, I'm not going to get the eyelid surgery even though I wanted it, you know, just because I didn't want her to think I was doing it for her. Like that she got to me, you know. What do people usually prefer, like 6, 7 millimeters?
You know, it very much depends on which Asian country. And they're all really different. Now this is 7
Vietnamese.
millimeters. This is, this size is pretty popular with, I would say, Japanese and probably Koreans. Koreans tend to be a little bit larger, so they might go around here. Vietnamese tend to have naturally a little bit larger folds, and they'll go up to here.
Whoa, that looks huge.
Yeah, but what I noticed culturally is as you go further towards Europe from the other side, the folds tend to get larger. If you go to Taiwan, they'll go 6 millimeters around like that. So a medium one at 7 millimeters for someone in your age group is something like that. And you relax your brow a little bit. Right at the side.
I'm like the only one who pretty much doesn't have the eyelid. Everyone in my family has it. All of my friends have it. So in getting this surgery, it's not, you know, I'm not going to be different from them all of a sudden. It's mostly aesthetics. I would say like, you know, 80% or so is personal aesthetics. This is what, you know, I was cultivated to believe, and through looking at magazines and just from personal life experience that I believe looks good and will look good on me personally. I don't see it as if I do this, I'm not going to be the person, I can't identify myself with being Asian anymore.
When we look at an individual's decision about whether to change their eye shape or to do something with the eye, the color of the eye, the lens of the eye, the color of the lens, or have an operation or the makeup or whatever, it is a personal choice. That's true. But that personal choice is tied into a chain of larger issues that ultimately are historical and are also geopolitical, because it has to do with a question of difference.
I think it is interesting that eyelid surgery is the most common procedure, plastic surgery for Asian Americans when they do seek out plastic surgery. So again, while the individual stories may differ, to wonder, what does this mean that so many people want this?
If it was simply an aesthetic choice, an individual choice, extricated and completely separate from the social historical context, the cultural context, then you'd see people actually de-lidding their eyes. But when you see systematically, and you see over time that the change is always towards whitening or Europeanizing your non-European features, then there's no way that you can call that an aesthetic or individual choice.
I think eyelid surgery doesn't have to do with racial identity. When young women especially try to get double eyelid surgery, it is to look like what they think is a more beautiful Asian American woman. Not to look like a white woman or a black woman or anything like that.
What? For $8 he slashes her eyelids and sews them back up again.
And some people will say it's not about looking Caucasian, but yet there is a piece of it where it does seem like, how can race not be a factor?
Then I have good eyes. I fool everybody. I look American, like Joe.
The whole notion that anybody would want to turn white is nothing but a fantasy on the part of the person who's so self-centered as to think that people would want to look like her or him.
How many of you know women who have had the double eyelid surgery?
Every one of us.
It's common.
I'm actually really considering it when I get older. I don't find myself very attractive. You look at the photos, you're like, okay, so this is what they want.
People are having a harder and harder time trying to figure out what is beautiful. And this is where I think the shape of the eye is such a good example of how this issue is played out.
The very, very heavy eyes do look extremely Asian. Why is that eye more Asian than the one that has some lid fold in it? Your Asianness is unmistakable.
Regardless we do eye repair or not, they're still Oriental. After surgery, still same Oriental.
To take away, to rape them of their Asian ethnicity, which you can do with the wrong type of eyelid surgery, I think is a terrible mistake. So that people have to be very careful what they ask for because they may get it.
You could have an eyelid fold and still retain your ethnic identity. You could have your nose bridge, you could have certain implants put in your face and still really retain ethnic identity. And I would tell those people that say that I'm playing with ethnicity, I would say that I'm just trying to make them look better.
There's tricks as a professional to widen your eyes, to brighten them, to shape and pull them out, creating illusions. But as far as my opinion as a professional, my intention is not to take away who you are, but to make you look more beautiful for who you are.
There's no question but what having double eyes brings you into the international non-Asian community a little more intimately in terms of the way your eyes look than rather if you have the very heavy Asian eyes that traditionally, going back 2,000 years in China, that the very heavy lid that had no fold in it was considered sinister looking.
The way in which race works is that we assign meaning to these kinds of racial markers.
When you talk to a person, the most intimate, conversations you have is when you can look directly at their eyes. You make eye contact with them. If your eyes are like this, does this look attractive to you? How about this?
You find rather negative vocabularies attached to single eyelid eyes.
They're dull, they're sleepy, they're passive.
Small eyes, 깍쟁이.
Yeah, 깍쟁이.
And that.
깍쟁이
is stingy.
Yeah, stingy.
A slanted eye makes you look sneaky, makes you look mean.
Almost rodent-like, very sneaky, right? Or snake-like.
These women are very much responding to the racial stigmatization that goes along with their racialized features, such as their eyes.
Ultimately, if you analyze this rhetoric, this way of talking about eye shape, you see that in the end, the West is the best and the East is inferior. It's a deviation from the norm. It may not be strictly Western-style racism, but there's still a hierarchy there.
I just went back from my consultation with the surgeon who's going to be doing my eyelids tomorrow morning. I'm pretty confident that there's positives and negatives. Like, I'm confident after talking to him that the surgery will go well because it seems like he's very experienced. And I've done a lot of research and I've been emotionally prepared, for this. So I feel a little better about the procedure after, but at the same time, I feel a little more nervous too because I realize, okay, it's going to happen tomorrow. Even though it's the least invasive surgery you can basically get, it is surgery nonetheless, and there's going to be a certain amount of pain and recovery. It's going to be an emotional thing because this is what I've had for 27 years, and then after tomorrow, it'll be different. I have an appointment with Dr. Lee, my aunt.
Okay. Could you hold a moment?
Okay. It'll temporarily make me happier, and that, these are the eyes I've always wanted. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted, larger eyes. Oh, wow. And I think I'll find my face more attractive. And I think temporarily, at least, it'll make me feel more confident about myself. I'll be relieved in another way because this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I was very internally conflicted. Not because I think it's going to ruin my Asian identity, but because I was like, is this going too far? When will it end, kind of deal. I got into modeling, so I felt like I needed bigger breasts. Plus, I was in a really bad relationship at the time where I saw him looking at Playboy, Maxim magazines, and there were all these women like with big implants. Also, I didn't like how my breasts were uneven, so I decided to go and get my breast augmentation.
I think this is probably the ideal size for you.
Yeah, I don't want to, the 9 was just, whoa,
yeah. Okay. So I think this is about the right size for you.
Like
okay?
7
millimeters, yeah.
Okay.
So I think that looks very good. What I'll do is we'll go to the next room and we'll get you slightly medicated, just with it's an anxiety medication, so you'll be very calm, but you'll be awake.
I know, because I'm beginning to freak out.
Okay, well that's perfectly normal, but that's where we're at now. I think we're gonna have a very nice session here, okay? Okay, let's come out this way.
You can always be unhappy no matter how perfect things are. Is it gonna end there, or am I gonna want something else? And if I want something else, how am I gonna handle it?
So let's go ahead and medicate her.
Okay, so you want us to give it to me?
Yeah, just give
That's what I worried about this procedure in particular, because the implants can be reversed, they can be taken out. But I don't think that this procedure can be reversed. I know that my taste in beauty changes, so I'm afraid later on, I'm gonna say, hey, I really now I want my, one lid back, or my no lid back, and I won't be able to have that again. So in a way, this procedure is a little more serious. I might not be the most beautiful person or the most beautiful that I can be, but it's not as important. It's not gonna contribute overall as much to my life goals. So, this is what I wanted, I did it, and there has to be limits. I can't be going on and trying to get more and more plastic surgery and things like that. But I would ideally like for myself after this just to, chill from caring about appearances or looks as much, because, I think I put myself through a lot of stress, and I'm getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just not gonna care. Because you can't, I don't have that type of energy. That's why I think after the dust settles with my move and everything like that, I'm gonna try to lead a more active lifestyle and be busier, so, I don't sit around and have time to focus on myself and as much.
Racism is so internalized that it becomes very difficult for it not to even be a subconscious part of your daily understanding and of your self-esteem. That's why some of these women, even though they're physically changing their racial markers to become more European-like, that they're actually just sort of discussing it as, it's just a choice to make my career options better, or it's just a choice to make me feel good about myself and be happy. Sort of these context-free, culture-free, or racial culture-free explanations for why they're doing what they're doing.
When is the Xanax gonna work?
Don't worry, it'll kick in well before we start doing anything.
I'm sympathetic with those that say it's giving up your ethnicity to do anything, and I think that they're correct in a sense, and I applaud them. But I think a little education would help them understand that the people who are doing it intelligently are just making more beautiful Asians and not taking away your Asianness and westernizing the eye.
So this particular method is really, I think, a pretty revolutionary suture method in that they're interlocking, and it prevents a cheese wiring effect that is really the bane of suture method techniques. By interlocking, you don't get the cheese wiring, and therefore you don't lose the suture.
Yes, it did start out trying to copy Caucasians. Maybe it started as racism, but I think the surgery, the beauty standard, it's kind of morphed. And now when you look at people who get the eyelid surgery, they're trying to emulate other Asians who have the crease naturally.
Maybe for that one person it might make a difference, but as a social, historical solution, it doesn't address the problem with how we formulate our identities and how we're made to feel inferior or lesser in our identities. I think that's the underlying problem that we have to really look at.
There's a gender difference in the kinds of pressure that men are under versus women are under to look good, and it means so much to so many women that they're willing to engage in rather painful and sometimes risky techniques to improve their appearance.
During the day of the surgery, I was nervous and scared and excited at the same time. But I felt like unprepared in a way, you know? It's really strange because I've thought about it, you know, for months. Can you see the lid already, a difference?
Even if it went perfectly well, there's going to be a new defect that's going to pop up in some amount of time after this one has been successfully dealt with. And that new defect may be one that they also have to do something about. The culture in some ways promotes that. It's very hard to feel good about yourself. On the one hand, it offers liberation and choices and opportunities. On the other hand, it's always telling you, well, maybe even then it's not good enough and you should strive for something better.
Attractive people, unfortunately, have an easier life in a lot of ways than unattractive people. Beauty is, it's pretty much a currency.
It's a very complicated, kind of polymorphous culture that is always promising lots of different commodities and lots of different problems and lots of different solutions. And it becomes this crazy process in which we as consumers who are trying to mold our identities and improve ourselves have to be, you know, navigating and negotiating through this and be making choices about, you know, what to do.
I saw my mom and she was like, you should have gotten them bigger, kind of thing. And I was just like, oh no, you know. It makes me go back to just, I don't know.
It makes you go back
to the reasons why, you know, I probably ever got plastic surgery in the first place, to the reasons why I would be unhappy with my appearance, you know, so, I don't know, that's a problem that we have, me and my mom.
So it becomes a real challenge, I think, to develop this kind of critique and to help arm our young people who are having to go through the gauntlet of the very intense commercial culture that focuses on body parts and music and being hip and cool and doing it just right and looking and moving a certain way. We have to arm our youth before they get to that point in their lives, which is getting earlier and earlier now, so that they have the critical ability to sort through that.
It can potentially become an addiction, and it is a really hard thing to say no to yourself, you know. To me, I feel like they're significantly different. It makes me feel like I am more attractive. I felt like a little better already. I know it sounds strange. You know, I had it in me, well, maybe I'll feel really complete after this. even though sometimes I'm like, they could be bigger.
It's a pretty complicated issue, and I think that there are so many factors that you have to look at. I think to blame it all on self-hatred would be too narrow a conclusion.
Third generation or second generations, where they are going, what they want, is it clear? That's a big question.
The future of Asian America is unwritten, but I think it's healthy that we're actually struggling with these issues and bringing them out on the table, not just among ourselves, but in mainstream culture as well.
The challenge that we have as Asian Americans is to begin to unpack these histories, begin to articulate them, begin to try to make some sense and understanding of all these multiple complicated influences that ultimately go into a decision about what to do with a part of our body.